Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the final garden hour for 2023. This webinar series originally started in 2020 and has been a collaboration of the entire K-State Horticulture Extension team. Since the start of the program, we have reached over 50,000 gardeners just like you. Can't believe we've reached that many. We are pleased to continue offering the K-State Garden Hour series for free to everyone. If you've enjoyed these educational activities, please consider making a tax-deductible donation. As you can see in the welcome slides, we are still about 71% of our goal for covering the cost of the Zoom webinar license for 2024. With your continued support, hopefully we can reach that goal before the end of the year. The link to donate can be found in the chat, or it can also be found on our K-State Garden Hour website. The webinar is hosted by K-State Research and Extension. My name is Calla Edwards. I am the horticulture agent for Butler County based out of El Dorado. Everyone involved in the development and presentations of these webinars is an extension professional for K-State. Most of us have a background in horticulture education or a related discipline, but most of all, we have a love for educating and sharing important gardening topics. Just a couple housekeeping tips. Please remember to use the Q&A feature for questions related to today's presentation. That is where the moderators will look for those questions at the end during our Q&A feature. The Q&A can be found at the bottom of your screen along the bar. Today's webinar is also recorded and it will be posted sometime tomorrow. We also will post a list of the links and resources that are talked about during the presentation or were recommended by the speaker. Our website is also where you can see previous recordings along with a list of upcoming topics for 2024. Our moderators today are Mr. Anthony Reardon and Ms. Pam Paulson. They will be sharing information in the chat throughout today and also will be facilitating our Q&A feature. Today's topic is beekeeping basics, getting your own colony started. And our presenter today is Mr. Ryan Engel. He is from the Golden Prairie District based out of the Wikini office. Ryan keeps bees of his own and has been keeping honeybees for approximately 8 years. So we're really excited to learn what he has to say. Please give us a few minutes while we get a transition to Ryan's presentation.
All right. Hello, guys. Let me get this moved over here. Okay, hopefully you guys can all see this. Again, my name is Ryan Engel. I'm the horticulture extension agent with the Golden Prairie District, so I'm on the western side of the state. And I'm super excited to be talking to you guys about this topic today. Again, so I've been keeping bees for a while. This is a subject that I'm super passionate about. So again, we're going to be talking about beekeeping basics and how to start your own colony. So I think a lot of this information is really kind of going to be directed towards definitely beginners, but especially individuals who don't yet have a colony but are interested in getting involved in the hobby. So I think we also kind of intentionally are presenting you with this information at this time of the year because this is really kind of when you're going to be wanting to be purchasing some of this equipment, do some of the planning work. So yeah, again, hopefully you guys enjoy this presentation and we can get started. I wanted to start with a quote. So if you ask 10 beekeepers the same question, you will get 11 different answers. And this is definitely true when we talk about kind of the art of beekeeping. So more how beekeepers manipulate their colonies. And this might be dependent upon where they're keeping honeybees or kind of the operation, the scale of their operation. Now, of course, this isn't necessarily true when we talk about some of the more objective things like honeybee biology, honeybee physiology. But it's definitely, the quote is directed towards the fact that beekeepers manipulate their colonies in different ways. So just know that today, some of the recommendations that I'm going to be making, they're just common ways that we do things. There are definitely more ways to carry out some of these tasks, but these are just some of the common ways that I see things done. I also wanted to preface this presentation just kind of briefly speaking about the importance of native pollinators. I think that honeybees have received quite a bit of attention through media over the past decade, and I think sometimes our native pollinators are kind of left out. But they're definitely more important, especially from an ecologic perspective. So our native pollinators can be more efficient at pollinating native plants. This makes sense. I mean, the two evolved alongside one another. There can be some instances where we see native versus non-native pollinator competition. So honeybees are not native to the North American continent. We do not have a native honeybee here in America. So in instances where we see very high densities of honeybee colonies, there is the potential for there to be some negative consequences for our native pollinators. And I think this is largely habitat dependent. So when we look at like floral abundance and floral diversity, I think that really is kind of a kicker when we look at how severe competition can be in this interaction. So many of our native pollinators, they're also specialists. So what that means, what I mean by that, I guess, is there's these tight-knit mutualistic relationships where a native pollinator might rely on one or maybe two native plants. And because of that, I think these species can be a little more fragile, maybe a little more, I guess, more at risk of being threatened, I suppose. And of course, our native pollinators are in need of conservation efforts. But the cool thing is habitat improvement can benefit both honeybees and native pollinators. So to move on to our species of interest, let's talk about honeybees. Honeybees are generalist pollinators, and what that means is they utilize a very wide range of plants. Really, it's astounding how many different plants they utilize. They also are domesticated, or at least kind of. And I think this is one of the most important things from kind of the human value perspective. So we can manage and move honeybee colonies around. Now, of course, moving wildlife around can bring about, I guess it has some downsides. The American beekeeping industry has definitely experienced this, but that's kind of a conversation for another day. But because we can manage and move honeybee colonies, we can really use them as a tool. So really there are sectors of the entire American fruit industry where honeybees are, at least currently, the way things are done, are kind of relied upon, where honeybees are trucked into these areas of fruit production and kind of placed there during blooming periods of these plants to kind of ensure sufficient pollination. So honeybees can enhance pollination in areas where native pollinators may be absent. Another cool aspect of honeybees is they're social. So some of our native pollinators tend to be solitary pollinators where they may be alone, living their life alone, or at least a portion of their life alone. Of course, honeybees don't do that. They're social. They live in colonies. And, you know, a really, really strong colony could have up to 80,000 workers inside of it. So when you start to look at the level or the magnitude of pollination that can occur from the presence of one colony, I mean, these bees can really get a lot of work done. And we definitely see that when we look at the economic side of things. So honeybees are known to pollinate around $15 billion worth of crops in the US annually, and that's not even accounting for the US honey market, which is valued at around $900 million annually. But one kind of common misconception that I see occasionally, I guess I want to state that keeping honeybees is not necessarily saving the bees. We hear that term a lot. I am an advocate. I'm all for it. Let's save the bees. But I think it may just be a little misguided if an individual is thinking, oh, I'm going to go out and get a honeybee hive so I can save the bees. I think there are probably better ways of doing that, especially, you know, things like habitat improvement, restoration, things like that. But of course, there are a few reasons why we might want to keep honeybees. So one could supplement pollination in the landscape. So say you have a large garden or a small orchard, keeping a hive of honeybees around would definitely help to kind of ensure sufficient pollination. Of course, there's honey and wax production. So some individuals get into this kind of for a side business, and that's, you know, totally viable. excuse me, of course, selling honey, and products made from wax, things like candles, beeswax, soaps, and there's tons of different things that can be made from beeswax and then sold. Of course, there's also some known medicinal value to honeybee products. So honey probably being one of the oldest known medicines. But even other things, beekeepers collect pollen from their colonies, and other cultures have utilized royal jelly, a honeybee product, and even bee stings are utilized by some cultures for some therapeutic value. But ultimately, I think this hobby, it's really fun. It's fascinating. Um, it's really it's a different experience to work with honeybees, and I think it's really fun to kind of just be involved and observe them. They're a fascinating creature. But let's talk about getting started. So today, again, this is very much an introduction to things. So I'm not going to be going over any of kind of the first year management strategies. This presentation is really here or put together just to get your feet kind of on the ground, just to get you going. So we're going to cover a few different things throughout this presentation. I want to go over beekeeping equipment, some of the equipment that you'll need, where you might want to place a colony, what's potentially good habitat, I suppose, where you'll source your honeybees from, and then ultimately how you're going to get those honeybees that you've obtained into your new equipment. So we will start with beekeeping equipment. So I would say roughly plan on budgeting around $600 to start one colony. Now, this will cover the bees themselves and really all the equipment that you're going to need to manage this one colony. So the bees themselves, I would say for the method that we're going to be talking about today, they're going to run you around $150. This is for a package of bees. And this price does seem to be going up every year, but that's roughly what I would kind of budget for the bees themselves. Beyond that, you need, of course, a hive. I'm sure you guys have seen these before. So that image on the right, that's kind of your standard beehive. I would say these cost roughly around $300. If you're kind of crafty, there are specs online where you could maybe make these on your own, save some money. Or you might spend a little more money. So there's kind of some convenient ways of purchasing these. You can typically buy an entire hive kit. And what that basically means is all of your boxes will kind of be sold in one lump sum, I suppose. But we'll go over the hive, the specific parts of it here in an upcoming slide. But I would say roughly plan on budgeting around $300 for that. Beyond that, I would definitely consider, or I would suggest wearing protective equipment. So a suit and gloves costs around $115, a little over $100. And I would definitely do that if this is your first time working with honeybees. Definitely be safe, guys. I'm sure you've seen people online working honeybees without any equipment on, and that's okay too. But definitely if you're just getting started, suit up. And if you feel comfortable, after doing it for a while and want to do away with some of that, make the decision at that time. We have a couple tools. Really, there's not a ton of tools beekeepers use, at least that you for sure would need to get into the hobby. So really not a lot of money there. And then of course your smoker. I'm sure you guys have seen these before. They run around $40. The one tool that I do want to talk about is the hive tool. So this is kind of, I guess you could almost look at it as like the Swiss Army knife of a beekeeper. I mean, you will use this tool for everything. So I would definitely keep a few on hand. There's a few different designs. So the image on the left there is a standard hive tool. The image on the right is our J-hook style hive tool. I personally really like the J-hook style hive tool. That little hook is really useful for prying frames out of boxes, and it's kind of just what I see most beekeepers in my area use. These are really, they're pretty cheap, I think $6 to $8. And you're definitely going to need these. So I would consider buying a backup, maybe two, maybe three, just so you have them. They're pretty easy to leave laying around in the field when working with a colony. So you're going to need one of these. I would, definitely consider maybe buying two of them and having them on hand. So I said I wanted to go over the Langstroth hive, the actual kind of components of the hive. The reason for that being is, like I said, you can buy these in kits, and I think that's really convenient because just everything is included. But if for some reason you're not able to find a kit and you have to purchase these all individually, I at least wanted to go over all of these parts so you knew kind of what I was talking about. So in this image here is our Langstroth hive. This design has been in use for probably 150 years, largely unmodified. So, kind of all the kinks have been worked out. This design works. This is what the industry, the vast majority of the industry uses. So I would definitely recommend going with this style of hive. There are other designs out there, some of which I'm sure work great, but for your first year, definitely go with a Langstroth style hive. This one in the picture here is a 10 frame. That's going to be the most common size you will find. And what I mean by that is each one of those boxes can fit 10 frames inside of it. They do sell 8-frame hives, and these may be useful if maybe if you're a little older, or if you have a bad back, if you have a tough time lifting heavy equipment, because this stuff does get heavy, especially when it's full of honey. So, but the 10 frame should work for most people. But to go through all these parts, and hopefully this works here. Yes, it does. Okay, so starting from the bottom and working up, beekeepers utilize a hive stand. Now, this can be basically anything that's strong, sturdy, and stable. So in this instance, we just have a pallet. So a lot of beekeepers will use pallets. Some people will use cinder blocks. And this is just going to elevate our hive and get it up off the ground. So that should help to kind of prevent our equipment from rotting or decaying. It also may help to keep water from washing into the entrance of that colony. So we definitely want to use something to get our hive propped up just a little bit. Moving on from there, we have our bottom board. So this bottom board is basically what all the other boxes are going to be stacked on, but this is also our hive entrance. So you could really kind of look at this as like the front door of the colony where the bees are going to be coming and going from. Now, I don't have it labeled, or you can't see it in this image, but if you do buy a hive kit, your hive kit should come with an entrance reducer. That entrance reducer, as the name implies, reduces the size of the entrance. And the reason why that's important, you're going to use it at certain times of the year, the spring, the fall, when it's a little cooler, to keep some of the cold wind from getting inside of that hive. And it also helps when your colony is a little smaller because it is going to give your bees a smaller area to guard. So I do have an image of that throughout this slideshow. I'll be sure to point it out so you guys know what I'm talking about here. But moving up from our bottom board and entrance reducer, we have our hive bodies. So you'll hear beekeepers call these deeps, but this is also the brood chamber. And what I mean when I say brood, I mean young, baby bees being raised, basically. So larva, pupa, things like that. But this is really, these deeps, this is where the magic happens in a honeybee colony. This is where you're going to be spending the majority of your time working. So in this area, we have the queen. She's marching around. She's laying eggs. Of course, if there's eggs, there's young. So there's it's where the brood is being raised. This is where the majority of your worker population is spending their time. And then they also store food here as well. So pollen, honey. Like I said, this is kind of the area. This is the heart of the hive. This is where you're going to spend most of your time. But moving up from the hive bodies, we have a piece of equipment known as a queen excluder. Now, if you do buy a kit, be sure to look into this. I don't know that most kits come with a queen excluder. Some beekeepers don't use them. We're not going to get into that. That's kind of a management thing. But for your first year, I would recommend using one. So if it doesn't come with a kit, purchase it individually and use it at least for your first year. So the reason for that being is this queen excluder, again, as the name implies, it excludes the queen. It prevents the queen from going up any further into our supers. So these boxes, these shallower boxes above our brood chamber and queen excluder are known as supers. So our supers, that's where all surplus honey is stored. So any honey that a beekeeper harvests generally comes from these supers. And the reason why that queen excluder is important is because it prevents her from getting up in that honey or that area and laying eggs and kind of dirtying up our honey. So it basically using a queen excluder basically ensures that any honey that you harvest is going to be pure honey. There's not going to be any eggs or larvae or any of that stuff in your honey. So, but moving up, the final pieces of equipment we have here, an inner and outer cover. You can't see the inner cover here. There is an image somewhere throughout the slideshow where I'll kind of point that out. And the final thing that I don't actually have labeled here, if you guys can kind of see my mouse, there's a little yellow object up on top of this hive. All that is a broken cinder block. A lot of beekeepers opt to place a heavy object on top of their colony just to ensure that no wind would blow that lid off. But moving forward from here, we're going to talk about where you might want to place your hive. So the cool thing about honeybees is really they can be kept virtually anywhere. It's kind of miraculous. They're super adaptable. They go out and they find what they need. But I would be sure to check city laws and ordinances. There definitely are some townships that have policy on this. So wherever you plan on keeping bees, just look into some of those laws and make sure you're not doing anything you shouldn't be. But ultimately, you want to find an area that's convenient for you. So what I mean by this, vehicle access is helpful. Like I said, some of this equipment gets heavy and it's not very fun having to carry it for long distances. So if you can pull up or nearby the hive, with some vehicle, that definitely is helpful. You definitely want to find an area that has dry ground year round. So the area should not be prone to flooding. If you get on the internet, I'm sure you could find images of people losing their colonies. Say, you get a heavy rain event, the creek comes up and it washes your stuff away and you lose your bees. So definitely make sure the area is dry year round. And one final kind of convenience would be keeping your colonies close to where you store equipment. So the thought here, and I guess I can tell you from experience, it's kind of inconvenient when you drive 20, 25 miles out to a hive. You get there and you figure out you're missing one piece of equipment and have to turn around and go back. So that's just kind of an added thing to think about. But a few more things. A secluded area is kind of beneficial away from human and animal disturbance. So in this image here, that colony was being kept in a pasture, and there was some paneling put up to make sure that livestock wouldn't potentially knock that hive over. Of course, a source of water nearby is helpful. Again, like I mentioned in the previous slide, you'd be amazed. These bees will go out and they will find this stuff. But I mean, ideally, if you could have a source of water within a mile from the hive, that would be probably sufficient. But of course, when you think about them foraging, the closer any of these resources are, the better. They're going to be more efficient, use their time better, the closer you have some of these resources. So of course, the same goes when we talk about flowering plants, an abundance of flowering plants being nearby. If you know of an area that just has tons of wildflowers or really any flowering plants, that's probably going to be pretty good bee habitat. A few other things here, protection from winter winds. So I see a lot of beekeepers keep their colonies on the south side of a windbreak. Now, you definitely don't want the area to be stagnant. It should be sunny and there should be air circulation. But what we're talking about here is just kind of protection from cold north winds. If you can't find an area like this, I see a lot of beekeepers take straw bales and just stack them on the north side of their hive before winter, and that works just fine. But the last thing we have here, a lot of beekeepers orient their colonies facing the southeast. So of course, we're talking about the northern hemisphere here, but facing them south, again, cuts down on some of that cold wind from getting inside the colony in the winter months. But orienting them southeast specifically, I think the philosophy here is as the sun rises and strikes the face of that colony, it kind of stimulates our bees to get up and active a little sooner in the day. So yeah, I think that's the thought there. But we're going to move on and talk about where we're going to get our bees from. So it's possible that you could purchase an established colony, though I do think this is uncommon. Maybe you know somebody around you who was a beekeeper but is getting out of the industry. But again, I mean, this doesn't happen a lot where you purchase a box and all the bees in it and you just take it back to your house. What's a little more likely is a nucleus colony, or you'll hear beekeepers call these nukes. And what this is it's essentially just a mini hive. So that's what we have shown on the slide here, that picture. So inside this mini hive, it might be 2 or 3, maybe up to 5 frames wide, but we have everything that's inside of an established functioning colony. It's just a lot smaller. It's a smaller scale. So we have a queen, we have a worker population inside one of these nukes. There's young being raised in there, and there's also stored food as well, honey and pollen. So the perk to starting colonies this way is we get kind of a head start if we start a colony from a nucleus colony. So you can kind of take your nuke and you could transplant it or transfer it into your new equipment, and they'll grow a little quicker than some of these other methods. But today, what we're going to be focusing on is a package of honeybees. And the reason why we're focusing on packages is because this is by far the most common way that new beekeepers start colonies. It's also going to be the most probably, it will probably be the easiest for you to get your hands on, I suppose. So to dive into what packages are, a package typically comes with 3 pounds of workers, typically. And if you're curious, that's around 10,000 bees. So you get bees, you get a queen as well. And if you notice that image to the left there, the queen is shipped in her own little cage. This is done for a few reasons. It kind of isolates the bees from her, but it still allows them to sense her, I suppose. But she's kind of protected in her own little cage. That cage is commonly, again, if you can kind of see my mouse here, it's kind of suspended from the top of the colony or the package. And these bees are just kind of surrounding her. But so it comes with bees, a queen, and it also comes with a tin or a can of sugar syrup. And of course, that's used just to kind of get the bees through their transit. That sugar can is kind of just what all those bees are clustered around as well. So you can order these from state bee clubs. So typically there's an individual who collects orders in one of these bee clubs, goes down to the area where these are put together or someplace and picks up a bulk order of these. That individual comes back and kind of distributes them to individuals in the club. This is a pretty common way people get these packages. If for some reason you're unable to get one through a bee club, there are beekeeping supply companies online that you shouldn't have any trouble finding one of these. And that kind of reminds me, when I was talking about equipment earlier, I did want to mention occasionally you can purchase that equipment from local hardware stores. Definitely, if you have a local store you know of that sells beekeeping equipment, go there and purchase that. But if you're having troubles finding it, there are these beekeeping supply companies online. They're super easy to find, but that's a good source to purchase both the equipment and potentially even packages of bees. So again, the reason why we're kind of having this presentation at this time of the year, orders for these packages are typically placed in January or February. They need to be placed by then. So I would recommend, if you guys are looking at starting a colony, this should be one of the first things that you get figured out, where you're going to get your package from, and place that order sooner rather than later. And these commonly are shipped, or you will receive them anywhere from March through May. Typically, it's kind of dependent upon the weather in these southern states where these packages are put together. So I also do briefly want to cover honeybee races. So the reason for this being is when you purchase your package or when you're ordering your package, you may have the option to select a specific honeybee race. So this is by far, this is not inclusive. This isn't every bee race out there. You may see different ones. I think these are just some of the more common ones that I see. So there are carniolan bees. You'll hear a lot of beekeepers call these carnies, and they're a gentle bee. They have moderate disease and pest resistance, But one kind of downside is they're prone to swarming. So this is a kind of a negative trait that beekeepers try to manage against. Moving on, we've got Caucasian bees. I think these bees were much more popular in the past. I don't know if you will see these or not, but they were more common in the past. They tend to be a gentle bee, but a few downsides, they're inclined to drifting and robbing, and they're known for their extensive use of propolis. So propolis is just the glue or the kind of resin that bees use to glue things together or seal gaps in their colony. So I think American beekeepers kind of got tired of their equipment being gummed up um, when using this type of honeybee. So I think they've kind of over time drifted away from Caucasian bees. There are Russian bees as well. I think these are slow. I think they're becoming more popular in the United States. They're generally a more defensive bee, but they have good disease and pest resistance as well as good overwintering ability. So I think it's some of these traits that's what's attractive to some of these American beekeepers, and why they're gravitating towards these Russian bees. One downside is they are prone to swarming as well. If you're a beginner here, I would advise not going with the Russian variety of bees, just because of that defensive nature, the slightly more defensive nature. Um, and if you want to experiment maybe in the future, wait a few years and consider doing that then. But by far, what is the most recommended race or variety of honeybee is our Italian bees. So the vast majority of the American beekeeping industry is composed or is Italian bees. So this is definitely what's recommended for beginners. I think this is probably for sure going to be what you will see the most of available out there as well. So Italian honeybees are gentle. They're good honey producers. The only kind of downside, or one of the few downsides, is they're known for their potential to overbrood. And all that means really is there are certain times of the year where they might raise more young than necessary, and therefore they consume more honey stores than what they would need to. But definitely, if this is your first year getting into this, just go with Italians. And if you want, again, if you want to experiment in the coming years, go ahead and do that. But now I kind of want to almost imagine like it's next April and you've ordered all your equipment, you've figured out where you're going to place the colony, you've ordered your package, and it's set to arrive. So we're going to walk through how you're going to install these bees, and yeah, some of what you need to do. So I would recommend the first thing that you do is assemble the hive. So this is kind of important, and I would do this just maybe the day before you're set to receive your bees, maybe a couple days before. Don't go out in the middle of winter and do this. There's no benefit. There's nothing to gain from doing that. But just a few days before, go out and set up your colony. And the reason kind of why I wanted to go over some of this is you'll notice in that image there, this hive looks a lot different than the one that I showed you earlier. So throughout the year, beekeepers kind of add equipment to keep up with the population changes in that colony. But because we're starting a new colony, we don't need near as much equipment. So I just want to walk over kind of your setup that you're going to need to install this package. So again, starting from the bottom, we've got our hive stand. And in this instance, the beekeeper used cinder blocks. Again, this can be anything that's stable, sturdy, just to elevate the colony a little bit. Above that, we have our bottom board. And at this point, I would be using your entrance reducer. So here is an image of that entrance reducer, that image to the left. And really, it's kind of just like a wooden stick with some grooves cut out. And you just wedge that in the entrance of that colony. And again, it's just cutting back on the size of the entrance so the bees have less of an area to defend. But above our bottom board and entrance reducer, we have one hive body. So only one of these deeps with all 10 frames inside of it. Above that, we have our inner and outer cover, and then the weight for the outer cover. So when you receive your package, there are a few things that you're going to want to do. The first thing you should do is inspect the package to ensure your bees are healthy. So it is normal to have a layer of dead bees at the bottom of the package. So you can see what I mean in this image here. A few bees on the bottom of that package, that's not uncommon. There's nothing wrong with that. So it's nothing to worry about. Now, I would be concerned if you saw 2 or 3, 4 inches of dead bees at the bottom of that package. You would definitely want to talk with whoever, wherever you got that, and get that solved. I know this is also kind of relative to experience, but over time, you'll even be able to tell how comfortable they are based on the noise that they're making. So there should kind of be a soft, gentle hum. I guess if you hear a loud, aggressive buzz, they're probably a little uncomfortable in that box. So what you want to do when you receive them is keep them stored in a dark location. I don't think that I mean, really just keep them out of direct sunlight. I think they can overheat fairly easily in these packages. So just store them in a dark location. It doesn't need to be, it shouldn't be cold. Room temperature is probably fine. So something typically like a garage or a shed where it's kind of shaded works best. You can also spray them with some sugar syrup. So what you're going to do is make a 1-to-1 ratio. So 1 part normal table sugar to 1 part warm water, mix that up, put it in a spray bottle, and you can go up to the screened sides of this package and just spray them a couple times. You don't need to get crazy, but a couple sprays per side. And that's going to do a few different things. It's kind of going to act to calm them down, kind of preoccupy them. So those bees will groom each other and clean some of that sugar syrup off of each other. So it's kind of calming them down, but it's also helping to kind of provide a form of insurance in the off case that that tin feeder inside your package ran out. So spraying them as soon as you get them is generally advised, I suppose. But ideally, you want to install these as soon as possible. Ideally, you take this the second that you get it and you go out to your hive and you install them. This can be pushed off for a couple days, but I guess if you have to. But again, I think the sooner the better here, guys. So to install them, when you're ready to do this, we're going to walk through that. The first thing you're going to do is open the empty hive, and you're going to remove 3 or 4 frames from the center. So just go out to the site, open the top, take your outer cover, inner cover off, and pull 3 or 4 of those frames out from the center of the hive. You can just set those frames right beside the colony. We'll be using them later. Now is a good time to go back and spray those bees with sugar syrup. Because we're getting ready to install these bees, spraying them with that sugar syrup, again, it's going to help to kind of preoccupy them a little bit. So these bees will be much less apt to fly if they've been coated with a little bit of that sugar syrup. So again, just kind of go to the side of that package, and just a couple sprays per side is typically enough. After you've sprayed those bees, you can remove the wooden panel on the package. So you can see what I'm talking about with that red arrow there. There's a wooden panel. You can see the beekeeper using his hive tool. Again, you use it for everything to pry that panel up. Now, don't be alarmed here. You're not opening the actual package during this step. So as you can see, this image on the right, the far right there, that's what it looks like when you get your panel pried off. So you'll see the top of the tin can feeder, and you'll also see a little tab. So this little tab to the left here, this metal tab, that is what's holding the queen suspended to the top of that package. So what you're going to do next is remove that tin feeder can and the queen cage. So this will be opening the package. Now, you shouldn't be alarmed. You shouldn't be afraid. Really, it's kind of surprising. These bees don't come generally, if they've been stored properly and they're calm. They really won't come roaring out of that package. They'll kind of hang around in there, but just move steadily, remove your queen cage, use your hive tool and kind of pry up on the lip of that feeder can, get those both pulled out and set aside. As soon as you get them out of the way, you'll have a couple bees come out of there, but shouldn't be a ton. As soon as you get those out of the way, you can use that wooden panel, set it back over the opening just to kind of keep it temporarily closed again. After this, the first thing you want to do, I guess, is inspect the queen. So pulling that queen cage out, you want to check her out and make sure she's doing okay. So it's common for her to have a few nurse bees inside of that cage. When they put these packages together, they'll typically put 2 or 3 normal bees in with the queen to kind of help care for her. But what you want to do here is you want to inspect the queen and just make sure she's alive, basically. Now, it does happen every now and then. Um, these queens sometimes die in transit. And if that is the case, you need to get that resolved sooner rather than later. So basically, just check out the queen cage, make sure she's alive and walking around in there, and you're good to go. You can set that cage aside. Again, I would just keep it out of direct sunlight. We'll come back to it in a minute. But now is the time kind of for it's the fun part. So we're going to transfer the package bees into the hive. And you may think that there would be a more elaborate way of doing this. And I suppose you could do that, but it's probably unnecessary. So what we do here is approach the hive with that package, and kind of with a firm grip on the package itself, you're going to firmly knock that package on the ground. Just once is typically enough. Or you could do it on the top of the hive, but one good thump. And all those bees that were suspended at the top of the package, they're rapidly going to fall to the bottom of the package. As soon as you do that, you can invert that package over the hive body, and those bees are going to pour out like water. I mean, they just roll out of that package. And you might have a few flying around. They're not aggressive really at this point. They're largely just confused. So when you're pouring those bees into the hive, it's best to try and get them in that opening that you made by removing those frames to where they kind of fall down to the bottom of the box. It's just kind of convenient when we do some of these later steps. And you can shake that package a couple times, give it a couple shakes, but I wouldn't go crazy there, because one of the next things we're going to do, you don't need to get all of the bees out of that box. Because the next thing we're going to do is prop that package in front of the hive entrance. And we'll typically leave this till the following morning. Most of those bees should be in by then. So one of the many fascinating things that honeybees do, it's probably very hard for you guys to see, but after we install the queen, which is what we're going to be doing next, basically, some of these bees are going to orient themselves kind of like this one is right here. If you guys can see that, hopefully you can. They're going to orient themselves like that, and they'll line up on this entrance, and they'll do something known as fanning. So those bees are going to be beating their wings rapidly and basically pushing that queen's pheromones out into the atmosphere. And what that's going to do is that's going to tell all these straggler bees in our package still, hey, the queen's inside. This is where we need to go. Get going, and they'll follow suit. So it's kind of cool to watch that happen. But from here, we're going to return all of our frames but one. So if you pulled 3 frames out initially, you're going to put 2 back in. And you'll see why here in a minute, but we're basically just leaving 1 frame outside of this colony. So just work slow here, kind of fan those frames slowly down into that packet or into that hive, and just kind of work slow to avoid crushing bees, but they'll get out of your way. So return all but 1 frame to the hive body. And again, the reason why is because we're going to install the queen now. Now, there's probably a few different methods of doing this. The one that we're going to talk about is probably the most common, and it's kind of a delayed release. It's a way that we can release the queen indirectly, because we want to avoid her potentially flying off, or maybe us injuring her unintentionally by releasing her directly. So this method that we're going to be talking about is a kind of a cool way that we can release the queen indirectly. So what we're going to do is go back to our queen cage, and we're going to identify the queen candy side of the queen cage. So it kind of looks like a sugar cube. It's hard sugar candy. So hopefully this arrow works here. Yep. So you see that side there, that arrow is pointing towards that queen candy. We want to identify that side, because what we're going to do is we're going to remove the plug from the candy side of the cage. We do not want to remove the cork on the end without the candy. So going back to this picture here, both sides of this queen cage has little corks or little plugs in it. We do not want to remove the one from this end. We want to pry this tab off and remove the plug from that end. What the bees are going to do over time, over the span of 2 or 3 days, the bees are going to chew through that candy, and the queen will kind of be released, like I said, indirectly over the next few days. So kind of going over this again, identify the queen's candy side of the cage, and then you're going to remove the plug from that side of the cage, from the queen candy side of the cage. After this, you've exposed that queen candy. She can't get it yet. The bees have to chew through that. We're going to install her in that hive. So you're going to wedge the queen cage in between two central frames. So we're going to use that gap that we created, I guess, by leaving out that one frame for the queen cage. So you can see in this image on the left, the beekeeper there is holding that queen cage, and with his other hand, he's using his hive tool to compress those frames together a little bit. He's pushing those frames together so it kind of grabs on to that queen cage. And the way in which the queen cage is oriented is also important. So you want to orient the queen cage with the candy up towards the sky or horizontal. So in this image, you can see there's our queen candy right there, image on the right. So this queen cage is oriented horizontally. The reason for this is we don't want to orient the queen candy facing down. There's the potential, this has happened and can happen. If we oriented it facing down, it's possible that one of the nurse bees inside of her cage dies, and she falls to the bottom of that cage due to gravity, of course, blocking the exit so our queen can't get out. So just know we want to orient it facing up or horizontal. But be sure the cage is secure between the frames. And also, you should be sure that the bees have access to the screened portion of the cage. So in this instance here, with it oriented horizontally, the screened portion of that cage is facing down into the hive, and those bees can still access that screened portion. They can still interact with the queen. They can still feed her. They can still sense her pheromones, things like that. But from here, we're basically done. So we can close the hive. I know this image here on the left is what our inner cover looks like. You couldn't see that in many of the other slides when we mentioned it. So close the hive, inner cover first, outer cover, and we're basically done. There are a few things that I'd like to talk about, just kind of finishing this up. There's a couple things that you're going to need to do post installation. So the first thing that you're going to want to do probably is remove the queen cage. So I would wait 3 or 4 days, return to the hive and open it up. You should then pull that queen cage out, and what you should see is that those bees chewed through that sugar candy and they released the queen. The queen is already in the hive. She might already be cruising around laying eggs, which is a good thing. At this point, we can add that additional frame that we left out when we were installing the queen. So at this point, you should have a total of 10 frames in your colony. Some other things you should also be doing post-installation: feeding. So this is really kind of the one time of the year, I would say, or the one instance where feeding is probably required or definitely should be done. And there's reasons for this. It's largely because wax production is dependent on sugar consumption. So what I mean by this is those honeybees have to be consuming sugar in order to kind of stimulate their wax glands to produce wax. And because we're using new equipment here, guys, there's no wax built up on these frames and the foundation of the frames. So they have nowhere to store food. The queen has very few places, if any, to lay eggs. So it's really important that when you're starting a brand new colony, pump the feed to them. That'll just help them draw out that wax a little quicker and become established quicker. So there are many different feeder designs. I don't have one to recommend over the other. The image on the left there is showing kind of an internal feeder design. So it takes up the place of a few frames. And there's pros and cons to all these designs, but the image on the right there is kind of it's an external feeder design. These are kind of convenient because you can tell when it's out of food, but I guess there's a few downsides that it's possible that the food could freeze if it gets really cold. And they're probably that external design is a little more prone to robbing. If there's other critters around that want at that, they can get there a little easier. But again, this is just going to be a 1-to-1 ratio of sugar to water. So normal table sugar, warm water, mix that up and add that to those. But from here, guys, you're basically just going to be caring for the new beehive. So continue feeding. I would definitely do this for at least probably the first maybe 1 or 2 months. Pump the food to them just to help get them kind of going, get them established. And then you can start to inspect the colony every 7 to 10 days. So be looking for things like brood production. Is the queen laying eggs? Do you start, you'll start to see larvae and capped brood. That's a great sign your colony is growing. Keep up with that comb building. Be watching for the presence of more comb. You can look for pollen presence. You can do this without opening the colony. So just sometime crouch beside the entrance of your colony and you'll watch these bees coming back. And you should see little pollen pellets on their hind legs. That's a good sign as well. But ultimately, you're going to be monitoring population growth. That's a lot of what we do as beekeepers. So you're going to add boxes as necessary as that colony begins to grow. You're going to want to be on top of that. So here are a few additional resources. Really, largely, guys, I think one of the best ways to learn this hobby is through a mentor. So I think it's really valuable to look into some of those state beekeeping clubs. They definitely say, a mentor can be very helpful when you're trying to get into this. There's a lot of good information out there, but hopefully these are helpful. And again, look into some of the state beekeeping clubs or local beekeeping clubs, whatever's around you. I would advise you to be involved. Beekeepers are generally pretty friendly people, and more than willing to help new people get involved. So definitely reach out and be a part of the community. And I hope you guys enjoyed this information and I found it useful. And I want to thank you all. Here's my contact info. I'm more than happy to be a resource. So if any of you have any questions, maybe take a picture of this or write it down. Again, I'm happy to be a resource and help you in any way. So thank you all.
Okay, Ryan, thank you. We've
Yeah.
got a few questions for you. You explained a little bit about the sugar water, but this person asked about hummingbird feeders and keeping them, or is it okay if they feed from the hummingbird feeders, or how to keep them away from the hummingbird feeders?
Well, I'm not sure what to do to keep them away from the hummingbird feeders. What I do know about that, though, or I guess one thing that immediately comes to mind is any form of like an external feeder like that um, could be kind of a breeding ground for spreading pests. So if it's something, I guess that's one pro to using those internal feeders is only that colony is going to be utilizing that feed. So if you kind of have a communal feeding site where your honeybees and maybe honeybees from elsewhere are able to utilize, that could be an area where you see some spread of pests, pathogens. I do know the commercial beekeeping industry, these guys that keep tens of thousands of hives, when they feed them, they do feed them kind of communally. I think they'll go out with like 55-gallon drums and just open the whole thing and let it go haywire. And it's just a cloud of bees just around the thing trying to get at it. But I think that is one downside that they see when they do things like that, the spread of disease and pests.
Okay. And another question on the sugar water, does it matter what kind of sugar, whether it's cane sugar or beet sugar?
I would look into that. I've read before to not use other things like I mean, you see all sorts of weird stuff on the internet, syrups, and from what I've read, I think they recommend just normal cane sugar. I don't know about the beet. Did you say beet sugar?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know for sure on
Sugar
that.
beet.
I do know though for sure it is safe, or I guess it's what most beekeepers use, just normal table sugar. and warm water. Mix that up. A 1-to-1 ratio for that time of the year is what works best.
Okay. And then this person asked if they see a honeybee in their yard, what are the odds that it's either a hive bee or a wild bee?
I don't know for sure the answer to that question. I do know though that there are a ton of wild hives. They've really kind of escaped, and they're, I guess you could call them feral at this point, where they're definitely not native to this area, but they're kind of everywhere. And what's kind of miraculous too is they can be so close to you. The hive itself can be located so close to you, and you may never know it. I live in Hayes, Kansas. So, but walking around and over the years talking with people, I've learned of probably 4 or 5 feral colonies within the city of Hayes, and it's not a very large city. I mean, but 4 or 5 myself, where yeah, those bees are wild, and it's kind of fascinating.
Okay, this person asked about hygienic bees versus Italian bees, and are the hygienic bees worth the extra money?
So I have no personal experience with hygienic bees. That would be that's a great question, by the way, whoever asked that. That's a great question. Hygienic bees, they kind of have some, I guess, genetic, that they're a little more resistant. I don't know if resistant is quite the right word, towards some of these pests, varroa mites specifically, maybe tracheal mites as well. But I don't know. I would, that's one of those questions where if I was that individual, I would get involved with one of these beekeeping clubs and really just start asking around, see if you could find somebody that has personal experience using those, and see what they think about it. I think it's a great idea. And when we talk about like IPM with honeybees, you know, one of the first kind of cultural things that we look for in combating some of these pests are things like some natural genetic resistance, and that's definitely what they're doing with those hygienic bees. They're awesome. Sound cool to me.
And then this person asked about just having backyard beekeeping in a neighborhood. Any considerations that you should maybe consider?
Yeah, no, that's a great comment too, or question too. I would definitely, I guess it's always kind to be neighborly, you know, be considerate of other people around you. Bees do scare a lot of people, and I mean, I don't think that's necessarily warranted, but I understand it. So yeah, it's good to check with your neighbors. If you are going to keep them in a small backyard, give them some space. You know, I wouldn't keep them 10 feet from your back door. I think your odds of just being stung would increase. I mean, sometimes I've been stung before just being in a bee yard, just kind of standing in the flyway from the entrance of a colony. It was real windy out, and I'm sure that bee was working as hard as it could to push through that wind, and it just kind of brushed against my face and stung me. I didn't do anything, but I think just giving them some space, and talk with your neighbors, make sure they're comfortable with it, or they know, and just be respectful and considerate to other people, I think is probably good advice.
And we've got a number of other questions here, but we've only got 1 minute left. So
yeah,
I think we're going to wrap it up. But like Ryan
sure.
said, he left his contact number information, so you can reach him with more questions.
Thank you, guys.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We typically have more questions than we have time for, and I know Ryan's always willing to answer them. We will also link any of those resources in the chat to our recording that will show up sometime tomorrow afternoon. Once again, thank you guys so much for joining our K-State Garden Hour series hosted by K-State Research and Extension. We are so glad you could join us today to learn about beekeeping basics and getting started with that hive. We are excited to continue offering this webinar series in 2024. You do not have to register for the 2024 season. You will automatically get updates and information for our webinars for 2024. You can also visit our Garden Hour website, review any of our 2024 presentations, along with watching any of our recordings from this year. The session will be posted by tomorrow. And if you are interested, willing, please make a tax-deductible donation to help us keep this series free in the future. If you have any other questions, please feel free to email us at gardenhour@ksu.edu. Thank you again. We hope to see you again in January on January 3rd to learn about floral design. Have a wonderful week.